Sports Weekly for Thursday, March 9th, 2022. Robert Harding, Justin Ritzel. We took a week off last week, but we're back this week. And boy, we got some doozy of topics to talk about. So let's get right to it. Syracuse game just ended a little over an hour ago. They fall to Duke 88-79. A very gutsy, spunky effort by the buddyless Orange. It's funny. I saw tweets at the end of the game saying, "Oh, if only they had Buddy Boeheim, they could have won this game." Well, you know something? Where were those tweets when Syracuse was winning earlier in the game? I mean, really, I give Syracuse a lot of credit. They played their butts off. And you know something? It's always great to see when a team has to deal with a missing player, whether it's injury or suspension, that the other guys step up and play their butts off. And that's what Jimmy Boeheim III did. That's what Joe Girard II did, or Joe Girard Jr. I mean, the seconds and thirds.
JG3.
And Cole Swider. I mean, those three guys played their tails off. The whole team played their tails off. I mean, I don't think you could look at any guy on that team that got in that game and say, oh, he didn't have an impact or didn't make a play or whatever. They all contributed heavily. And they outplayed Duke, really. They outplayed Duke. I mean, arguably to like the last couple of minutes when, I don't know whether they were tired or but Duke made some shots and Syracuse couldn't. And that was really the end of it. Now, the hot topic that Robert wants to talk about is the Buddy Boeheim suspension. Okay.
Whoa.
Because, look, we all saw it yesterday. Look, number one, the ACC blew it from the standpoint of the officials during the game. Okay. Buddy should have been ejected right then and there, and that would have been the end of it, and he would have been playing. Okay. Now, again, we don't know whether he had played or not today. If he played today, maybe Syracuse gets blown out again like the first two times. We don't know. But irregardless, they should have called it right then and there. Now, the fact that they didn't, and then they went back and looked at it and then decided to suspend him. I mean, look, he deserved it. Okay. I mean, if you're a Syracuse fan, you don't want to hear that. You're looking at these things with orange-colored glasses. I get it, but he deserved to be suspended, okay? He hit the guy, okay? Slugged him, okay? Not like a punch, so to speak, but he slugged him in the gut. And that's wrong, and even he admitted he was wrong, and you have to pay the price. So, you don't like it as a Syracuse fan. It's not the storybook ending you wanted, but it's the right call, the right thing to do. And it's tough, but that's just the way it goes. I mean, you can't react like that. And I get it. It is a reaction. I mean, sometimes things happen in the heat of the battle, and you just react without thinking sometimes. We saw it with maybe Juwan Howard, the Michigan coach, a few weeks ago, who took a shot at a Wisconsin assistant coach and was suspended for a few games. I mean, things happen in the heat of athletic competition where you do something that maybe you don't ordinarily do. And look, no one's saying that Buddy's a bad guy or he's a cheap shot artist. No, he's not. He's a good person. He's a hard player, plays very hard. It's sad, but ultimately he did something and it was worthy of a penalty. So, Robert, your thoughts on the Orange?
Well, I think if you to take it piece by piece here, when you go back and watch the full play, the Florida State player comes down the court, puts a little extra into that box out attempt, and I think Buddy spent a little too much time in the suburbs, a little soft, thin-skinned response to that. Decides to clock the guy in the gut, a little too much in that response, because as we know in sports, and I hate this more than anybody, but when you retaliate, it's always the second guy that gets caught. And so he was on, everybody saw it, except the refs. Now, I had someone tweet at me last night, because my take through the whole thing was like, as soon as I saw it and he wasn't punished, I was like, there's no way he's playing the next day, because and somebody had said to me like, oh, so this is a makeup call, basically you're giving a pass to the refs for blowing the call. And it's like, look, even if it is called on the floor, I think the ACC takes a look at it. In this case, I think they would say, well, he was ejected or whatever the punishment is, and no suspension. But in this case, it was like it went unpunished on the floor, and the idea that the ACC would just let it go unpunished again is just silly. Yes, the ref should have caught it to begin with, and it was a bad miss on their part. But this thought that somehow the ACC was going to give Buddy a pass, Jay Billis and all these guys out there saying like, oh, this doesn't warrant a suspension. Well, I've been watching sports for a long time. I've never seen a guy throw a punch in a game that's caught and, either they're ejected or there's some sort of supplemental discipline for it. So this idea that he was going to go, undisciplined is ridiculous. I also think it's ridiculous that, they would have won today with him. I think that the fact that he wasn't on the floor gave them a little extra juice to go out there and give Duke a run for their money. And Jimmy Boeheim had a great game. I watched this entire game. Jimmy Boeheim had a great game shooting the ball. At one point, he was 6 for 7 from deep. I mean, that's you can't ask for much better than that. JG3 for the most part had a good game. He laid up some bricks there at the end. The problem with Syracuse though is that on the offensive end of the floor, they need to have some more talent, especially on the inside, to get scoring that way. Because if you're only relying on the three, you can put up some big points, but down the stretch, in a close game, it'd be nice to have an option inside. And then on the defensive end of the floor, atrocious. Look, if you can't play the zone properly against outside shooters, don't play it. Play man-to-man. And if you don't have the players on the floor to play man-to-man, bench them and put somebody else in. Because in this day and age of teams with multiple outside shooters, even big men that can shoot outside, I don't see how the zone is effective unless you modernize it in a way that makes it more effective. I think Boeheim hasn't really adjusted properly to that. These Syracuse teams back in the day, known for their defense, and now, teams are putting up huge amount of points. Like Duke put up 88 today, which is a lot for a college game. So, I think that Syracuse needs to go back to the drawing board there and figure out how to adjust that defense, not just rely on the zone so much. They did go into some man-to-man a little bit today, but not for the entire game, which they should have done. So, a lot of questions about Syracuse going forward. What does this program look like? What's the future of it? Because it seems like a lot of the other programs in basketball are kind of moving by them. And here's Syracuse just kind of in the ACC, not really doing much, not really being a contender for the conference title or anything. They're kind of lost, I think, in a way. They don't have much of an identity. So let's see if Boeheim or someone else can right the ship here.
Go ahead, Justin.
Well, regarding the Boeheim suspension, it's just one of those things where you wish it would have been called correctly in the moment, because I don't think Syracuse necessarily, they didn't need Buddy yesterday against Florida State. I think they could have used him today. Yes, his absence forced other guys to step up scoring wise, whether it be his brother Jimmy or Joe Girard, but you just felt that in the second half, like, okay, Girard's kind of run out of steam. They figured out how to defend him, and it's basically Jimmy or nothing. So you just would have liked to have that extra scoring threat down the stretch, which they didn't have. Really for Syracuse, the difference for them, obviously, aside from teams figuring out how to better attack that zone, is their big men. They just, on either end of the court, Robert focused on how they couldn't score down low on offense, but that was Duke's game plan in the second half, is we're gonna hammer them down low. and be opportunistic when we have open threes, which they were. Much better shooting second half for Duke, but Syracuse seemed, at least in the last 10 years, 15 years maybe, Syracuse seemed to be at their best when they had like a Fab Mello, rest in peace. Just that big body that could really control the paint on both ends. And they haven't really recruited that guy in recent years. So, and I'm not sure if Jim Boeheim's the guy that's going to be the one recruiting these guys going forward. It would not shock me one bit if he decides to step away. I really don't know what he would be sticking around for at this point. Both of his sons are going to be gone. You see kind of his contemporaries, Roy Williams from UNC retired after last season. Krzyzewski's gone after this season. I just wonder if this is the right time for Jim Boeheim to step away. Or maybe he wants to put a bigger dent in that career wins record and make up for some of these ones that he feels he lost out on. Who knows? But it's going to happen in the next couple of years. Just that big transition for Syracuse that we've been waiting on. But it wouldn't shock me if we hear in the next couple of months that Jim Boeheim's stepping away.
He supposedly has a highly touted recruiting class coming in. So I think I think he wants to coach those guys. And, I understand that, like, it does make sense. Like, as he coached his two sons for 1 year and this will be the last year and everything. And I mean, I know he did discuss, like, there is a plan for him, when he leaves to, what they're going to do this, for his succession. I get that. And when he brings that up, but, the thing is, I mean, look, as long as Jim Boeheim is healthy and he has the support of the administration, he's not going anywhere. I mean, seriously, there's no way Jim Boeheim gets fired, number one, okay? I know nobody said that here, but that's not happening. I mean, he had his first losing season in 46 years of coaching. But, I mean, he's going to call his own shot. He's earned that right. He's not going to be fired. He will coach as long as he wants to coach, as long as he feels he can do the job adequately. And, like I said, he's in good health. And if he wants to coach, then so be it. And I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he'll be back next year. So, all right. Anything else you guys want to add about the Cuse before we move on? All right. Well, breaking news. I guess the lockout is over from the standpoint of a tentative agreement has been reached between the owners and the Major League Baseball Players Association. I was getting alerts on my phone just a couple minutes ago. So it looks like the Players Committee has approved it. And now the owners have to vote on it, and I guess they needed 23 out of 30, so we'll see what happens there. But if that's the case, spring training starts on Saturday, and the regular season will start a week later than originally planned, April 7th, and they are going to play a full 162-game schedule. So there are probably going to be some double headers mixed in there. So look, here's the thing. It never should have came down to this. I mean, the lockout started on December 1st. They should have had this approach from the beginning where this was wrapped up maybe by January sometime, where spring training started on time in mid-February, and it never got to this point because, baseball gets another black eye. And, we've all ripped on Rob Manfred, the commissioner, many, many times, and deservedly so. Arguably the worst commissioner in all the professional sports. And that's a lot considering you've got Gary Bettman and Roger Goodell on that list. But arguably, Manfred is the worst commissioner in the four major pro sports leagues. So, look, I'm just happy they got this thing done if it is done. And we're going to have baseball maybe a week later than we want. But it's still good that we're going to have it. We're not going to miss games. And just finally, look, baseball is a sport that it does need some tweaks. Okay. The game needs to get away from this homers or whiff type approach. And we've talked about this in the past, the things about the shift and I'm not going to say the A word. Okay. Because I have nothing against that word. Okay. My issue is when we depend upon it so much, it defies common sense. Okay, and you know I'm talking about the Tampa Bay Rays in last year's World Series. So, anyways, I'm just happy we have an agreement. The other stuff can settle itself out in the long run. Rob Manfred still stinks. Robert's daughter agrees with me. I hear her agreeing with me in the background. So, yes. All right, Justin, your thoughts about baseball?
Yeah, it's funny all the and we contributed to this, but the doom and gloom about baseball when we last did our video, and yeah, ultimately they're not going to miss any games, and that's the important thing. I'm less concerned. Obviously, the big issues for the two sides, the players and the owners, was most of it is financial. Obviously, that's how lockouts. That's always the big issue on how we're going to share revenue, and with baseball, it comes down to what the luxury tax threshold is going to be, or competitive balance tax, as they like to call it. For me, I'm looking at what kind of stuff is included as far as what's going to affect the game in terms of, where the National League is adopting the designated hitter. They're thinking about banning the shift, stuff like that. The money, as far as coming from the fans' perspective, that doesn't really matter. As Chris said, what is baseball going to do to get more action in the game and not be so reliant on strikeouts or home runs, which I think I'm not turning off baseball because that's the way the game's been played lately, but I think there are things that you can do to encourage type of play that was when baseball was at its best, stealing bases, trying to take the extra base, making it more of a doubles and triples game instead of, walk, home run, or strikeout, which is what it's been. So, if those issues are addressed in this labor agreement, I think it's a win for baseball. And honestly, had this dragged out for another couple weeks and the season does get shortened to 154 games or 146, whatever number they would have landed on, I don't think that's what the worst thing that could happen. Baseball season is awfully long, and I don't think 2 weeks worth of games would have been the end of the world. But hey, I'm glad there's an agreement. I'm a baseball fan. Like I said a couple weeks ago, I'm excited for the storylines that are abound in the 2022 season. And, if you're a baseball fan, I think you got to be excited about kind of what's going to happen in the next couple of days as far as free agents, because the hot stove is going to be cooking. So that's something to look forward to here right away.
Yeah, it's going to be a flurry of activity because, like you just said, Justin, free agency is going to basically start soon, the next day or two, and it'll be interesting to see where certain players land. And of course, spring training. I mean, it's going to be pretty chaotic spring training, no doubt about that. And Robert, one question I wanted to ask you is our old friend Tim LeCastro, who's been kind of in baseball limbo. I mean, you know better than I do. He's basically a free agent, right? Because the Red Sox traded for him and then released him, and he is not part of their roster, so he could conceivably go someplace else, right?
Yeah, that's right. This whole thing really, I think, interrupted his his plans. He's teamless at the moment. What happened was that the Red Sox. Basically, and this was just around the time that Manfred was, putting the lockout into effect. But, the Red Sox, I think, wanted to sign him to a minor league deal, which he could have still done during the lockout. But I imagine, and I haven't talked to Tim about this, but, my hunch is that he didn't want to settle for that if, he could sign a major league contract with, any other team. And I think that, one of the things that this helps with is that, for the last while here, he's had more time. This has bought him more time to recover. Spring training games. I've checked our good friends over at ESPN. It looks like spring training games will start March 17th. Well, that was right around the time they said that LeCastro would be ready to play. So, this has actually, I think, helped him in a way, even though he doesn't have a team yet, but it's bought him more time to, recover, to build up that knee again, and to get ready for the 2022 season. So we'll see what happens with him if he signs with the Red Sox or another team. Maybe the Yankees bring him back into the fold. Who knows? Baseball's as we have seen over the last several weeks here, this is a wild sport. To segue to the deal here, there's a lot that we don't know about this. There's a lot that probably the average fan doesn't really care about. It gets into the financials and things, but really, I think one of the big takeaways, a couple of the big takeaways, making this idea of a DH in the NL permanent. That's obviously a big change because the NL has always wanted to be separate. Dating back to the 70s when the AL adopted this rule. The NL stuck with having pitchers hit, which I know the Max Scherzers of the world probably won't be happy about this, but it's probably better for the game that you actually have guys in there who can hit more than 200 in a season and do more than just lay down some lousy bunts. And then the 12-team playoff, 6 teams from each league will make the playoffs. That's obviously, it's grown over time. It was 4, for a while with, division winners and a wild card. Then 5, they added a wild card team. So now we're going to have 6 teams from each league, and which I think could make it'll make it interesting. I mean, the regular season, it makes you wonder, why does this sport still have a 162 game season? But at the same time, when do most people watch baseball? October. So it's going to add some extra competition to it, which I don't think is a bad thing. So hell, maybe even the Angels can make the playoffs this year. We'll see. So
I look forward to the Angels being the 7th best team in the American League and still missing the
playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. But the bottom line is it's great that they came to a deal. Manfred is still a big old stooge. I mean, you guys know how I feel about Bettman. Manfred's at the top of the Harding poop list now. Bettman is a god compared to Manfred these days. So, I thought this was just a bad way to go about it. The lockout. I think Manfred probably viewed this as a tactic to get the players to talk. But the problem is that you lock them out and then you don't initiate talks. And they wasted all this time. They could have avoided this weeks ago, I think. But here we are. We got a deal. Baseball can move on. It looks like opening day will be April 7th. So mark that on your calendars.
Yay. All right. Our last topic, the NFL. Of course, we have to discuss the NFL. It's like a rule on this show. We must discuss something to do with the NFL, no matter what time of the year it is. So, but of course, this is worthy. I mean, it's not like we're talking about nothing here. I mean, this is some pretty significant stuff. So, since Monday, we've seen Aaron Rodgers is going to remain with Justin's Green Bay Packers, and we've seen Russell Wilson get traded from Seattle to Denver in a truly a blockbuster trade with numerous high draft picks going. And then yesterday, the Colts basically saying to Carson Wentz, heave ho, and we're dumping you with the Washington Commanders. It's going to take a little time getting used to saying that name eventually, but it's the typical NFL. We're getting ready for free agency. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be fun. And the NFL just is going to continue to print money because they are the 800-pound gorilla of sports, that they're always being talked about, whether it's March, April, May, June, or July. Doesn't matter when it is in the off season. The NFL is going to have a big space in the sports ecosphere. So, Robert, your thoughts on all of the NFL stuff going on?
Well, it's been a wild week in the NFL. I mean, the Rodgers news, to me, it actually wasn't surprising because I know that there have been other teams mentioned. Oh, maybe he'll go to Denver. Maybe he'll go to Pittsburgh. Maybe go to another team. But I mean, let's be honest. If you're a guy at that stage of your career, do you really want to move on when you know that the Packers still have a lot of talent coming back. They were making moves to make this possible to keep Rodgers in the fold. And, this kind of went under the radar. They franchise tagged Devontae Adams. So Adams is coming back, which is huge. That gives Rodgers his number one target to throw to for at least the next year. So, those were all big things. But the Russell Wilson to Denver trade, that's huge for Denver. This is a team that I in watching them, I saw somebody put out power rankings or whatever. Oh, Denver's now the third best team in the AFC. That's garbage. They're not that good. But I do think that they're at least now a playoff contender. That, in that tough AFC West, they now have a proven quarterback, which they've lacked, to go with, a pretty talented team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You got a couple good receivers there, Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. You've got Javonte Williams in the backfield. Nice running back there, which is something that Russell Wilson hasn't had in Seattle all these years since Marshawn Lynch's departure. So that's big. And then Denver's defense is solid. So, I think this could be a team that, is in the conversation again, and Wilson could make the difference, get them that win or two that they need to put them in the playoffs. Does that make them a contender for the AFC Championship? I don't think so. I think we need to pump the brakes on that. They've got a long way to go to get past the Chiefs, get past the Bills, even teams like the Ravens and the Titans. I don't think Broncos are better than those teams yet. The Carson Wentz thing, I don't blame the Colts for moving on. I think they thought Wentz would come in and, they could rejuvenate his career with Frank Reich as coach. But as we've seen, Wentz is kind of a shell of himself since that near MVP season when he tore his ACL and the Eagles won the Super Bowl. He just hasn't been able to put it together the same way. He shows flashes here and there, but he's not. I would argue he's not a starting NFL quarterback. I think that he has this reputation only because he was a top 2 NFL pick in the NFL draft. And so, teams are willing to give up a ton for him. But I think more and more, now that he's on his third team, we're going to see that, this guy just can't cut it as a starter. Great backup maybe, but, I don't think he'll be the answer for the Washington Commies either. So, it's already an interesting offseason. I think it's not done. We'll see how crazy the draft is. There might be some big free agent moves ahead. Bobby Wagner was let go by Seattle. That's a guy who I think has a few years left in the tank and has been one of the best defensive players in the league. It's going to be interesting to see where he lands. The Bills apparently want to be players in free agency to build up that roster, which is good. If they really want to win a championship, that's what you have to do, as the Rams have shown and other teams have shown. So, it's an exciting time. I think the NFL free agency period will be wild. The draft will be even crazier. We're gonna see a lot of change, I think, come next season. There's going to be some other moves, I think, that are made that some of these teams will look not so familiar to us anymore. Will that make them better? Remains to be seen.
Justin, your thoughts?
I mean, I'm stunned. I know it's the season of piling on Carson Wentz, and I totally get the reservations about his play, but not a starting quarterback in the league. I mean, the guy had 27 touchdowns last year, 7 picks. He does have talent. He's stubborn, for one, and he has costly mistakes. But I have a hard time saying he's not a starter in the league when you got bums like whoever Pittsburgh's going to start this year. Mason Rudolph. Jimmy Garoppolo is like a high commodity right now. He's not good. Carson Wentz is better than Jimmy G. He's better than Baker Mayfield. He's got talent. He's stubborn, and I think it's not a good sign when, as you mentioned, a guy like Frank Reich, who built him up as a young quarterback, even he's like, I don't know. I'm kind of over Carson Wentz, but to say he's not a starter, I think is a bit drastic. Is he going to propel Washington to be a playoff team? No. I mean, come on. He's not like going to win you a Super Bowl by any means. I don't think he should be a backup, but we'll see what happens. I'm sure our good friend Jeremy Boyer is not exactly thrilled that he'll get to experience Carson Wentz next year, but I guess it beats what they had last year. Taylor Heineke. Rodgers, I'm not surprised that he's returning to Green Bay. It makes the most sense for him. The NFC is a weak conference. When they're talking about the Rams as the best team in the conference, a team that Green Bay has just spanked every time they've played in recent years. It makes all the sense in the world if Rodgers' main goal was to win a Super Bowl, to do it in Green Bay. And I think they're, while all the people are talking about they're not going to be the same team next year, they're really hurt by the salary cap situation. I disagree. I think that they had several significant players that missed basically all last year that you imagine will come back healthy in 2022. I think they're going to, for better or worse, they're going to have a home playoff game at Lambeau Field next year, and very, very possibly could have the number 1 seed for the 3rd straight year. And we'll see if they can take advantage of it. But the Packers are going to be one of the best teams in the league next year with Rodgers. It makes all the sense in the world that he would come back. The Russell Wilson thing, I'm a bit torn on because I do think, I think Denver has a lot of intriguing pieces on that team, both offensively and defensively. Really what's held them back from kind of beating the Chiefs is the quarterback play. You look at some of these games those two teams have played. A couple of them have been on like Sunday Night Football, so I tuned in, obviously. And Denver really gave Patrick Mahomes some fits. They've held them under 30 points several times in the last few years, and they just could not score that 1 or 2 times when they got into the red zone. That was especially the case last year with Teddy Bridgewater. Like they dominated time of possession and all that, but once they got inside the Chiefs' 10-yard line, they could not score. Obviously, Russell Wilson is a guy who's going to make a difference there. So I could really see this going either way, whether they kind of step up and become one of those top teams in the AFC with Russell Wilson. And I could also see them being a big disappointment because he has not played well for the last year and a half, between his injury in 2021 to going back to 2020, when his last 8 games, he was just not good after being the MVP favorite the first half of the year. So it really depends on what kind of Russell Wilson we're going to get. I think if he's even 80% of what he is capable of, or what we've seen from him at his best, I think they're a playoff team. If you get Russell Wilson from the first half of 2020, I think they can absolutely win that division. The Chiefs are a very top-heavy team. I think the Chargers, while they have a great quarterback, they have some holes in their roster. I think Denver, if you ask me what team has the best roster, just kind of in a vacuum, they might not have the best quarterback, but I think you can make an argument the Broncos have as good a roster in the AFC West as anyone. So we'll see what kind of Russell Wilson we get. I like the gamble. I'm not sure what the hell the Seahawks are doing. They kind of seem like a franchise that's lost at sea. With Pete Carroll, not sure that's the guy you want to hitch your wagon to, but we'll see with them. But this was brought up on a podcast I listened to. This could actually be the rare trade where both teams lose it. Seattle could come away with not really taking advantage of all these draft picks, and Denver could come away with spending a lot of capital to get a quarterback who doesn't deliver for you. So we'll see. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks, they have the draft capital now to really do almost whatever they want. They could move up the draft board. Obviously we know there's not really a super talented quarterback prospect. The Liberty guy, what's his name? Wilson, I believe. Is it Wilson?
Malik Willis.
Malik Willis.
Willis, there we go. Willis, I'm sorry. And Kenny Pickett from Pitt. Those are really the two top guys. in the first round that are being discussed. So, look, the Seahawks, they've been a very good team for the last 10 years, and longer than that, actually. You could almost say 15 years. And nobody remains that good for that long unless they've got some smart people in the front office. And I think they do. So I think that, they'll use those picks and they'll adjust accordingly. I mean, we know that they've got to make some major changes. And Pete Carroll, I mean, he's a great coach, and yeah, he's 70 years old. But something I always thought Pete Carroll is a very young 70. I mean, I don't think the age is that big a deal. We look at Bill Belichick, who's over 70, and he's still plugging away pretty darn good in New England. So, all right, Robert, looks like you want to say something.
Hold on, before we go.
Yes.
Pete Carroll. That guy is going to step back the Seahawks by 5 to 10 years. I don't think he's a good coach at this stage. I mean, he's a defensive coach, and guess what? Ever since Richard Sherman left and Cam Chancellor left and Earl Thomas left, what's he done? The Seahawks have had a terrible defense. It's been the Russell Wilson show. So I disagree with you, Chris. If I'm a Seahawks fan, I'm pissed because I'm thinking Pete Carroll, he has this antiquated way of how he envisions a winning football team because of the team, this all-time team that they had in 2013, where we're gonna run the ball with our great running back, and we're just gonna kick everyone's butt when we're on defense. And I don't know, is that a consistent way to win football games, especially the way they've drafted? Look at their drafts in the last few years. They haven't had a single blue chip player. And they've traded draft picks for Jamal Adams. How's that worked out? That's why I say lost at sea, because I don't think, even though they have this draft capital, I don't think they've done anything in the last 5 to 6 years in their drafts to suggest they're going to take advantage. And I think Pete Carroll is kind of the final decision maker there, even though he's the coach, not the general manager. And a lot of these seasons where they've fallen short, and they have not returned to a Super Bowl since that Malcolm Butler play, I think that's Pete Carroll's doing, not Russell Wilson.
We'll see what happens. So, Robert, anything else you want to throw in there before we sign off?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. Of course, I find it odd that, you of all people would be commenting on someone's age. I think you should, avoid those waters. Awful dangerous of you. But yeah, Pete Carroll, I think, I think the one thing I can say about Belichick is, even as he gets older, he does adjust, game plans and things. I mean, look, he's playing in a conference with all these high-powered offenses, and, he's in the midst of kind of a, rebuilding project of sorts of his own there with, Mac Jones, getting him, established as the franchise quarterback and getting that defense back up to snuff. So, I think he's approached it a little differently. It seems Pete Carroll, just wants to take the same approach year after year. And I think that message can, kind of get, it can get boring for players, especially those who have been there for a while. And I think that Seattle, I know that there was some talk this offseason that, well, maybe they won't bring Carroll and the GM John Schneider back. Ultimately, those two are coming back, but I mean, I could see this being the last year of that. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if Seahawks got off to a bad start that Carroll's fired mid-season. Because I think I think that it's certainly going in that direction. But Seattle, I think they're in a tough spot. That division that they're in is pretty tough. I agree with Justin. The NFC as a whole is pretty weak, but when you look at the competition that Seattle faces, I mean, they're really up against it there. I mean, say what you want about how, poorly Cliff Kingsbury has done at times with the Cardinals. At least that team is in contention. Obviously the Rams and the Niners made the playoffs last year, and the Rams won the Super Bowl. So, I think that for the Seahawks, they're going to be looking around saying, if we don't right this ship soon, we're going to be a losing franchise for a long time, because a lot of these other teams, they're younger. The Rams have shown a willingness to invest. If I'm Seattle, I'm saying, okay, we need to get this figured out sooner rather than later, or we're going to be way behind the 8 ball compared to our NFC West foes.
We'll see. All right, gentlemen. As always, fun. Great to be back. We may not be doing this every week, depending on what's going on in the wide world of sports. We might be taking a week hiatus here and there, but it'll be available on the Citizens Facebook page. There might be some other places we can find. You might be able to find it, but we'll let you know. So, folks, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you sometime.